I discovered my wife is using our joint credit to fund his wedding. The sterile glow of the laptop screen was the only light in our bedroom, a silent accusation in the pre-dawn darkness. It wasn't the amount that hit me first, though that was staggering enough. It was the name, scrawled across the transaction history like a brand. David Miller. My wife, Sarah, had a David Miller in her life. A David Miller whose wedding she was apparently paying for, using money from the Visa card we shared, the one with the rotating balance we'd sworn to get under control. I felt my chest tighten, a cold, hard knot forming where my heart used to be. This was impossible. My fingers trembled as I scrolled through the past few months, each charge a fresh stab. Caterers, a photographer, a venue deposit. Not just little things either, significant chunks, hundreds, then thousands more. It was a tapestry of betrayal woven with threads of silk and champagne, all funded by our shared dream of maybe someday having a down payment for a decent house. I'd been working extra shifts at the plant. Sarah had been picking up freelance graphic design gigs, all to get us ahead, to finally feel like we were making progress. And all along she'd been, siphoning off our future for this David Miller's happily ever after? The audacity of it, the sheer gut-wrenching gall, was almost enough to make me laugh. A hollow, broken sound that wouldn't have been out of place in a horror film. This story, this mess I'm in, it's something else. And if you're finding yourself drawn into this, if you're feeling that pull to understand how someone gets to a place like this, please hit that subscribe button. And while you're at it, throw a like on this if it's resonating with you. Share it with anyone you think might need to hear something like this, and leave a comment down below with your thoughts. It helps keep these stories coming, and honestly, it helps me feel less alone in all of this. Sarah and I had built our life in this sprawling ranch house in the suburbs of Denver, the kind of place with a 2-car garage, a decent-sized backyard for barbecues that never quite lived up to the Pinterest expectations, and neighbors who waved but rarely invited you over for coffee. It was comfortable, predictable. It was us. Or at least, that's what I'd thought. We'd met in college, a classic meet cute over a spilled latte in the library. She was all bright eyes and quick wit. I was me. Awkward, earnest, and completely smitten. We dated for 3 years, got engaged on a hike overlooking the foothills, and married a year later. It wasn't a fairy tale, not the kind you read in books, but it was real. We fought, sure, over stupid things like who left the toilet seat up or whose turn it was to do the dishes. But underneath it all, there was this bedrock of affection, this quiet understanding that we were a team. Or so I believed.
I'd stayed up late, ostensibly to finish some reports for work, but mostly because Sarah had gone to bed early, complaining of a headache. It was a familiar ritual, these late nights, me with my spreadsheets and her with her phone, scrolling through endless feeds, a soft glow illuminating her face. Usually, I'd just let her be. Everyone needs their space, their downtime. But tonight, something felt off. A subtle shift in the air, a lingering scent of perfume that wasn't hers, that wasn't mine. It was faint, almost imperceptible, like a ghost of a fragrance. I dismissed it at first, chalking it up to the neighbor's strong floral spray or some errant breeze. But as I sat there, the laptop's hum a dull drone in the silence. That feeling of unease began to prickle at the back of my neck. I'd meant to close out the browser windows, to shut down for the night, but my cursor had landed on the banking app icon. A stupid, impulsive move, a twitch of paranoia I'd instantly regretted. I told myself it was just to check our joint account balance, to see if we were close to hitting that savings goal. But the truth was, a seed of doubt had been planted, tiny and insidious, and it was growing in the darkness. And then I saw it. The credit card statement. I had opened it on autopilot, expecting to see the usual monthly onslaught of groceries, gas, utilities. But the dates, they didn't line up with our usual spending patterns. There were dates scattered throughout that felt out of sync. I clicked on the details, my heart beginning to thud against my ribs like a trapped bird. That's when David Miller's name popped up, repeated again and again. My mind raced, trying to make sense of it. David Miller. Who was this guy? A friend of Sarah's from college? A work colleague? But the charges were too specific, too personal. A florist, a custom tuxedo rental, a champagne tasting. These weren't the kind of things you'd buy for a casual acquaintance. These were wedding expenses. And not just small ones. Significant, extravagant, wedding-sized expenses. I kept scrolling, my breath catching in my throat. There was a payment to a venue called the Willow Creek Estate. I'd never heard of it. A deposit for photography dated 3 months ago. A substantial amount for a DJ. It was all there, laid out, in stark, undeniable black and white. Each transaction, a tiny nail in the coffin of my reality. My Sarah, the woman I'd shared my life with, my bed with, my secretsmith, was funding another man's wedding with our money. The world tilted. The familiar walls of our bedroom, usually a sanctuary, suddenly felt like a prison cell. The wedding photos on the dresser, the ones of us beaming on our own wedding day, seemed to mock me. We'd promised forever, hadn't we? We'd sworn to love and cherish, in sickness and in health, for richer and for poor. Was this the for richer? Because it sure felt like for poorer to me. I tried to rationalize it.
Maybe it was a surprise for someone, a wedding gift? But the amounts were too large, too consistent. And the fact she'd kept it hidden, meticulously, deliberately hidden, gnawed at me. If it was a gift, why the secrecy? Why the furtive transactions on our shared card? My mind conjured images, grotesque and distorted. Sarah, laughing with this David Miller, their heads close together, oblivious to the life she was dismantling behind her back. Was this David Miller some old flame? Someone she'd regretted leaving? Was she having an affair? The thought, when it finally solidified, was a physical blow. It stole my breath, made my vision blur. An affair. It was the only explanation that made any kind of sense, however horrifying. I looked at Sarah, sleeping peacefully beside me, her face soft and unlined in the dim light. She looked so innocent, so mine. How could I have been so blind, so trusting? Had I been so caught up in my own life, my own dreams, that I'd missed the subtle signs? The late nights that weren't about work? The hushed phone calls she'd quickly end when I entered the room? The way her eyes would sometimes flicker away when I asked her what she was doing? I had attributed it all to stress, to the demands of her freelance work, to her needing a little personal time. God, I was such an idiot. My hands clenched into fists. Anger, hot and furious, began to bubble up, a stark contrast to the icy dread that had initially gripped me. How dare she? How dare she betray me like this? How dare she take our shared future and lavish it on some other guy's wedding? The word wedding itself became a bitter pill to swallow. The sacred union, the commitment, the love, all of it tainted. I opened another tab, my fingers flying across the keyboard now, fueled by a desperate need for confirmation. A quick Google search for David Miller and the Willow Creek Estate. The results flooded in, each one a blow more potent than the last. Photos, galleries, social media profiles, and there he was, David Miller, a man with a winning smile and eyes that seemed to hold a spark of something I'd once seen in Sarah's. They looked happy, so incredibly happy in every single picture. Sarah, of course, was nowhere to be seen in these results, which, in a twisted way, was almost worse. It meant this was his wedding, his life she was investing in without me. I clicked on a wedding blog, one that featured events at the Willow Creek Estate, and there it was, a post titled "Rustic Romance at Willow Creek. David and Emily tie the knot." Emily,
not Sarah. So, it wasn't their wedding. It was David Miller's wedding to someone else. But then, why? Why was Sarah paying for it? My mind, already reeling, spun into overdrive. Was she still in love with him? Had she been secretly meeting him? Was she trying to win him back? Or was this some twisted revenge, a way to hurt me because of some perceived slight I'd never even noticed?
The possibilities, each more painful than the last, swirled in my head. I went back to the credit card statement. The dates. They spanned the last 6 months. 6 months of deception. 6 months of my wife, my partner, my everything, living a double life. And I'd been oblivious, blissfully, stupidly oblivious. I remembered Sarah mentioning a friend, a close friend, who was getting married. She'd been vague about the details, said she was helping out where she could. I'd assumed it was small gestures, maybe a thoughtful gift or some emotional support. I never in a million years would have suspected this. My gaze drifted back to Sarah. She stirred in her sleep, a soft sigh escaping her lips. Was she dreaming of David Miller? Was she dreaming of the life she was building for him? A cold wave of nausea washed over me. I felt a profound sense of loss, not just for our marriage, but for the man I thought I was, the man who had believed in loyalty, in commitment, in the sanctity of what we had. That man was dead, and this new reality, stark and brutal, had taken his place. I closed the laptop, the screen going black. The silence of the room pressed in on me, heavy and suffocating. I didn't know what to do. Confront her? Wait for more evidence? The thought of facing her, of seeing the lies in her eyes, made my stomach churn. But the thought of letting this go, of pretending I hadn't seen it, was even worse. I stood up, my legs feeling like lead. I needed air. I needed to escape this room, this house, this life that had suddenly become so alien. I walked out of the bedroom, down the silent hallway, the floorboards creaking under my weight. I didn't bother with a jacket, just opened the front door and stepped out into the cool, crisp night air. The stars were out, a million tiny pinpricks of light against the vast expanse of the sky. They seemed so distant, so indifferent, just like the life I thought I knew. I stood on the porch, the cold seeping into my bones, and stared out at the darkened street. My mind was a jumble of anger, confusion, and a deep, gnawing pain. I discovered a secret that had shattered my world, a secret that promised to unravel everything I held dear. And the worst part was, I had no idea how to even begin to pick up the pieces. The wedding, the money, David Miller, it was all a tangled mess, and I was caught right in the middle of it. I looked up at the moon, a sliver of white in the darkness, and a single, agonizing question echoed in the emptiness of my mind. What the hell am I supposed to do now? I felt a tremor run through me, not of cold, but of a profound, terrifying uncertainty. This was just the beginning, wasn't it? The very, very beginning of a nightmare I hadn't signed up for. And the thought of what came next, of how this would all unfold, sent a fresh wave of dread through me. I was standing on the precipice, and I had no idea if I was about to fall or fly. The silence of the suburban night offered no answers.
Only more questions, and the chilling certainty that nothing would ever be the same. The moon, a sliver of white against the black, offered no solace. Just a cold, indifferent eye watching me stand there, shivering on my own porch in the middle of the night. I'd come out here to think, to breathe, but my brain was a runaway train, a wreck of possibilities and accusations. Sarah, David Miller, the wedding, it was all a damn circus, and I was the unwitting clown. I replayed the transaction history in my head, each number a separate betrayal. The florist, for crying out loud. Thousands spent on flowers. What kind of flowers warrant that kind of cash? And a DJ, so he could serenade his new bride with cheesy hits while my wife was out there, somewhere, orchestrating this whole damn thing. It felt like I was in some B-movie, a cheap thriller where the unsuspecting husband stumbles upon the sordid truth. except this was my life, my marriage, and the stakes were my entire future. I walked back inside, the click of the lock sounding deafeningly loud in the quiet house. The house, our house, the one we'd poured our savings into, the one we'd talked about painting the nursery in someday. Nursery. The word hit me like a punch to the gut. Was that part of the plan? Was this David Miller some kind of placeholder? Some desperate attempt to recapture something lost? Or was it something even more twisted? A way to get back at me for some perceived failing I was completely unaware of? The anger was still there, a dull, throbbing ache, but it was starting to get tangled with a profound sadness, a grief for the marriage I thought I had. I'd always prided myself on being a good husband, supportive, present, loyal. I worked my ass off, came home, listened. What more could I have done? Had I become so predictable, so boring, that she felt the need to seek out this David Miller and his damn wedding? I went into the kitchen, the fluorescent light buzzing overhead, casting harsh shadows. I opened the fridge, staring blankly at the contents. A half-empty carton of milk, some wilting lettuce, a Tupperware container with leftover spaghetti. The mundane reality of our lives felt like a cruel joke against the backdrop of Sarah's secret spending spree. I grabbed the milk, poured a glass, and drank it down in long, desperate gulps. It tasted like ash. I needed to talk to her. I couldn't let another minute go by pretending everything was normal. But how? How do you confront someone with something so devastating, something that fundamentally alters the foundation of your relationship? Do you lay it all out? The credit card statements, the names, the amounts? Or do you ease into it, a subtle probe, a carefully worded question? The thought of her face, her reaction made me sweat. Would she deny it? Would she twist it, try to make me the bad guy? I knew Sarah. She was good at deflecting, at turning situations to her advantage. This wasn't just a minor indiscretion. This was a calculated, months-long deception. I leaned against the counter, the cold formica seeping through my t-shirt. The house was eerily silent. I imagined her asleep in our bed, blissfully unaware that her carefully constructed world was about to come crashing down. Or was she aware? Was she just waiting for me to find out? The uncertainty was a form of torture. I thought about all the little things I'd dismissed, the times she'd been distant, her phone glued to her hand, the vague answers to my questions about her day, the occasional late nights catching up on work. I'd been so eager to believe in our happy life, in our partnership, that I'd let my guard down. I'd become complacent. And complacency, I was learning, was a dangerous thing. I picked up my phone, my thumb hovering over Sarah's contact. No, not yet. I needed a plan. I needed to be sure, to have all my facts straight before I walked into the lion's den. I opened the banking app again, pulling up the credit card statement. I started making a list, meticulously noting each transaction, each date, each amount. The venue deposit, the caterer, the photographer, the DJ, the custom invitations. It was a comprehensive guide to someone else's happily ever after. I tried to imagine Sarah making these calls, arranging these details. Was she doing it with a smile on her face, a pang of guilt? Or was it all just a matter of business, a transaction? The more I looked, the more I realized the scale of it. It wasn't just a few $100s here and there. We were talking tens of thousands of dollars that were supposed to be going towards our future, towards a down payment, towards paying off our student loans, towards the life we'd promised each other. And it was all being funneled into what? A wedding for David Miller and Emily. Emily. The name kept coming back to me. Who was Emily? Was Sarah friends with her too? Was this some elaborate scheme involving all three of them? The complexity of it all was overwhelming. It was more than just infidelity. It was a labyrinth of deceit, and I was lost in the center of it. I remembered a conversation Sarah and I had a few months ago, not long after she'd started mentioning her friend's wedding. I'd asked her, casually, if it was a big affair. She'd shrugged, her eyes not quite meeting mine. "You know how it is," she'd said, her voice a little too light. "Weddings are expensive, but she's really excited." At the time, I'd nodded, accepting her explanation.
Now it felt like a deliberate lie, a carefully crafted deflection. She'd known then. She'd known that she was not only lying to me, but actively participating in the financial ruin of our own plans. The anger flared again, hotter this time. It wasn't just about the money, it was about the betrayal of trust. It was about the fact that she'd looked me in the eye, day after day, and lied.
She'd smiled at me, kissed me, slept next to me, all while orchestrating this elaborate deception. The sheer audacity of it was breathtaking. It was like she was playing a game, and I was the pawn, utterly unaware of the rules or the end game. I started searching online again, this time looking for David Miller on social media. It was easy enough. He had a public profile. Lots of pictures of him and Emily. They looked happy, genuinely happy. Engaged, then married. The wedding date was in the photos, a beautiful outdoor ceremony. The same venue, the Willow Creek estate. It was all there. A perfect, sun-drenched picture of a life I had no part in, a life my wife had been bankrolling. I scrolled through his posts, looking for any mention of Sarah. Nothing. She was completely absent from his digital life, which I suppose was a good thing. It meant she wasn't part of this couple's narrative, but it still didn't explain why. Then I saw a comment on one of David Miller's wedding photos. It was from a Sarah K. "Congratulations, you two. Wishing you a lifetime of happiness. So sorry I couldn't be there, but I was there in spirit." Sarah K. My heart lurched. Sarah K. Was that her? A subtle nod to her involvement? It felt like a taunt, a little wink from beyond the grave of our marriage. I went back to her social media profiles, her public ones at least. She hadn't posted much recently. A few vague, inspirational quotes, some pictures of her latte art, nothing that hinted at any kind of secret life. I knew Sarah, though. She was much more private online than I was. She compartmentalized. Her work life, her friends, her whatever this was, it was all kept separate. And I'd never really questioned it. I'd let her have her space, her privacy, and she'd used that space to build a fortress of lies. I opened a new tab and typed in David Miller, Emily wedding. I wanted to see if I could find more details about the wedding itself. The blog post I'd seen earlier was just a snippet. I clicked on the link and it opened up a full wedding feature on a popular wedding blog. The photos were stunning, professional. They showed David and Emily exchanging vows, dancing, cutting a cake, and there, in the background of a few candid shots, looking like a guest, was Sarah. She was wearing an elegant dark blue dress, her hair pulled back. She looked happy, but also a little detached, like she was observing, not participating. She was smiling, but it didn't reach her eyes. My blood ran cold. She was there. She was at the wedding. She'd flown out or driven out to witness this, and she hadn't told me. She'd gone to a wedding she'd helped pay for, a wedding of a man she was clearly involved with in some capacity, and she hadn't thought to include me. Or maybe she had, and the thought had been too much to bear. The idea of her standing there, watching David Miller marry someone else, while she was the one funding it all, it was almost comical in its absurdity.
But there was no humor in it, only a deep, soul-crushing pain. I scrolled through the blog post, my eyes scanning the text. The bride and groom story, their journey, and then a detail that made my stomach clench. David and Emily met through mutual friends, but it was Emily's cousin, Sarah, who first introduced them years ago. Sarah has always been a guiding force in David's life, offering unwavering support and friendship. Sarah, not Sarah K. Sarah, my Sarah. Friendship, guiding force, support. These were the words they used, but the credit card statements told a different story. A story of financial commitment that went far beyond friendship. It was a narrative of control, of influence, of a deeper, more complex entanglement. Had she orchestrated this entire wedding? Had she played matchmaker, then lover, then financier? The possibilities were endless, and each one more disturbing than the last. I felt a wave of nausea. I closed the blog post, my hands trembling. I needed to get out of the kitchen.
I needed to be somewhere where I could just breathe, where the silence wasn't so heavy with unspoken accusations. I walked back into the living room, the familiar furniture suddenly looking alien. The couch where we'd watched movies, the rug where we'd hosted parties, it all felt tainted. I sank into an armchair, running my hands through my hair. My mind was racing, trying to piece together the fragments of information to make sense of the chaos. Was she still in love with him? Was this a grand gesture to try and rekindle something? Or was it something else entirely? A power play? A way to exert control? The fact that she'd kept it hidden for so long, that she'd gone to the wedding without telling me, that she'd used our joint account, it all pointed to something deeply unsettling. I thought about Emily. This Emily, the bride. Had she known about Sarah's involvement? Had she suspected anything? Or was she as oblivious as I had been? The thought of her, a victim of this intricate web of deceit, added another layer of guilt to my own burgeoning anger. I picked up my phone again, my fingers automatically navigating to Sarah's contact. This time, I didn't hesitate. I had to know. I had to confront her. I dialed her number, my heart pounding in my chest. It rang. Once, twice, 3 times. Just as I was about to hang up, I heard her voice, sleepy and a little groggy. Hello? My own voice felt hoarse, unfamiliar as I spoke. Sarah, we need to talk. Now. There was a pause, a beat of silence that stretched into an eternity. Then her voice, no longer sleepy, but sharp, laced with a subtle unease. What? What is it? It's the middle of the night. I took a deep breath, the words catching in my throat. I know, Sarah. I know about David Miller. And I know about the wedding. Another silence. This one was heavier, colder. The air in the room seemed to crackle with tension.
I could almost feel her entire body stiffen on the other end of the line, even from miles away. When she finally spoke, her voice was a whisper, barely audible. I don't know what you're talking about. The denial. The immediate instinctive denial. It was like a confirmation. My gut twisted. Don't lie to me, Sarah. Not anymore. I saw the credit card statements. I saw the payments. The venue, the caterer, the photographer, everything. You've been funding his wedding. Her silence this time was a scream, a confession. I could hear her breathing, shallow and rapid. It's not what you think. Her voice was shaking now, a fragile thread of desperation. Then what is it, Sarah? I demanded, my voice rising, the anger finally breaking through the shock. What the hell is it? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've been systematically draining our savings to pay for another man's wedding. A wedding you even attended, apparently. Without me. The admission, unspoken but undeniable, hung in the air between us. The carefully constructed facade had crumbled, revealing the raw, ugly truth beneath. I heard a soft sob from her end of the line, a sound of pure despair. I can explain, she choked out, her voice cracking. Can you? I retorted, my voice hard, unforgiving. Because right now, Sarah, I don't think there's any explanation that could possibly make this okay. I thought we were a team. I thought we were building a life together. But it turns out, you were busy building someone else's. I waited for her to speak, to offer some defense, some plea. But there was only the sound of her ragged breathing, the quiet sobs echoing in the vast, empty space that had suddenly opened up between us. The silence was deafening, more damning than any accusation. I felt a chilling certainty settle over me. This wasn't just a mistake. This was a choice, a series of choices. And I had no idea if our marriage, or me, could survive the fallout. I hung up the phone, the click echoing in the quiet room. I stood there, my hand still gripping the phone, my body trembling. The damage was done. The secret was out. But the real damage, the unraveling of my entire world, was just beginning.
I looked at the clock on the wall, 3 a.m., and I knew with a terrifying certainty that sleep would not come to me tonight, or any night soon. The image of Sarah at that wedding, a silent, smiling guest at a celebration she secretly funded, was seared into my mind, and the question that gnawed at me, the one that kept me rooted to the spot, was simple, brutal, and unanswered. Was she there as a guest, or as something more? The phone felt heavy, a cold weight in my hand even after I'd placed it back on the charger. Her confession, or rather, her choked sobs and fragmented attempts at explanation, were a raw wound. It's complicated, she'd managed, her voice thick with unshed tears. Complicated. That was her go-to.
When things got messy, when she couldn't control the narrative, it was always complicated. But this wasn't just complicated. It was a betrayal so profound it felt like a physical blow. I walked to the window, the pre-dawn sky a bruised purple. The streetlights cast long, distorted shadows, making familiar objects look sinister. The manicured lawns, the neat rows of mailboxes, the parked cars, it all seemed so normal. A facade, just like my marriage had been. I pressed my forehead against the cool glass, trying to force some semblance of calm into my racing thoughts. What was I supposed to do now? How did you even begin to untangle a mess like this? My mind kept returning to the wedding photos. Sarah, in that elegant blue dress, a polite smile on her face. She looked like a stranger. Not the Sarah I knew, the woman who laughed easily, who'd hold my hand during scary movies, who'd always been my anchor. This woman in the pictures and the woman on the phone, they were two different people. Or maybe she was always this person, and I was just too blinded by love, by routine, to see it. The credit card statements were still spread out on the kitchen counter, a stark testament to her secret life. I'd spent hours poring over them, each line item a fresh stab. The deposits for catering, for a string quartet, for a bespoke wedding cake. It was a meticulously planned event, a masterpiece of deception. And I was the fool who'd footed the bill. I thought about the things we'd talked about, the house repairs we'd been putting off, the vacation we'd promised ourselves after a particularly rough year at work, the quiet, comfortable life we were supposed to be building. All of it, apparently, secondary to Sarah's clandestine involvement with David Miller. What was the dynamic here? Was she in love with him? Was this some twisted form of penance for a past transgression? Or was it about power? The thrill of orchestrating something so massive, so impactful from the shadows. The thought of her, sitting in on wedding planning meetings, choosing flowers, tasting cake, all while pretending to be just a supportive friend, it was a dizzying image. And then there was Emily, the bride. Had she known? Had she been complicit, or was she an innocent party, unaware of the financial strings being pulled by her fiancé's friend? The thought of Emily's potential pain, her own shattered illusion, added a layer of sick complexity to my already spiraling emotions. I went back to the counter, the statements still there. I needed more. I needed to understand the timeline, the progression. I pulled up Sarah's work calendar on my laptop, her login credentials readily available, a habit born of shared digital lives, of unquestioning trust. Her work was demanding, that I knew. She traveled sometimes for conferences, for client meetings, but I'd always assumed it was all strictly business. Her calendar was a meticulously organized schedule of meetings, deadlines, and travel.
But tucked between business trips, I started seeing personal entries, vague enough to be dismissed, but in retrospect, screamingly obvious. Lunch with friend, followed by a location that, according to the credit card statements, was a high-end boutique specializing in bridal accessories. Dinner engagement. The same night, a substantial charge appeared for a private tasting at a renowned restaurant known for its wedding menus. It wasn't just a few transactions. It was a sustained, coordinated effort. She had been living a double life, meticulously carving out time and resources for this elaborate charade.
My anger was a simmering volcano, threatening to erupt. It wasn't just the money, though God knows that was a gut-wrenching betrayal. It was the calculated nature of it, the planning, the sheer audacity of lying to me, to my face, for months. I looked at the clock again, 4 a.m. The sky outside was a lighter shade of gray now, the first hint of dawn. I felt hollowed out, like an empty shell. The emotional exhaustion was immense, but there was a grim resolve settling in. I couldn't just sit here and let this consume me. I had to do something. I found myself drifting back to the living room, to the worn armchair where I'd first sat after finding the statements. I picked up a framed photo from the side table. Sarah and me, laughing on a beach vacation years ago. Her eyes sparkled, her smile was genuine, unguarded. Was that woman real? Or was that just a performance too? A carefully curated moment for posterity? The uncertainty was a poison. I started thinking about our conversations, about the subtle shifts in her behavior, the times she'd been more guarded with her phone, the occasional evasiveness when I asked about her day. I'd dismissed it all as stress, as the natural ebb and flow of a long-term relationship. Now, each of those moments felt like a clue I'd missed, a warning sign I'd chosen to ignore. Complacency. That was the word that kept coming back to me. I had become too comfortable, too sure of our foundation, and she had exploited that. I stood up, pacing the room. The silence was no longer just an absence of sound. It was a heavy, oppressive blanket, thick with unspoken truths and shattered expectations. I needed to see her, not on the phone, not through a screen. I needed to see her face, to look her in the eye and demand the full story. The wedding was over, the blog posts were public, the illusion was shattered. But the damage, the deep, lingering damage, was still unfolding. I grabbed my car keys, the cold metal a stark contrast to the heat of my anger. I didn't know what I would say, what I would do when I saw her. But I knew I couldn't wait. I had to confront this head-on. As I walked out the front door, the cool morning air did nothing to soothe the burning in my chest. The sun was beginning to peek over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink.
It was a new day, but for me, it felt like the end of everything I'd known. Driving across town, the familiar streets seemed foreign, tainted by the knowledge I now possessed. Every house, every car represented a life, a story. Were there other hidden lives, other betrayals happening behind closed doors? The thought was almost too much to bear. I pulled up to her parents' house, the place where she was staying after our last argument, the one I'd foolishly thought was just a minor marital spat. Her car was in the driveway, her old car, the one she'd loved before we bought the new SUV. It felt like a step backward, a retreat into a past that was now irrevocably altered. I walked to the front door, my hand trembling slightly as I raised it to knock. The sound echoed in the quiet suburban street, a single, sharp punctuation mark in the stillness. I waited, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. The curtains in the living room window twitched. The door opened slowly, revealing Sarah. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her hair disheveled. She looked as worn out and broken as I felt. The moment our eyes met, the careful facade she might have been trying to maintain crumbled. There was no point in pretending anymore. "You came?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. I didn't answer, just stepped past her into the house. The air inside was thick with the smell of stale coffee and disinfectant. It was a house of hushed tones and unspoken anxieties, a stark contrast to the vibrant, chaotic life she'd been living. "We need to talk," I said, my voice low and steady, betraying none of the turmoil raging inside me. She nodded, leading me into the living room, her movements stiff and jerky. We sat on opposite ends of the worn sofa, a chasm of unspoken words and profound hurt separating us. The framed photos on the mantelpiece, family gatherings, holidays, milestones, now felt like painful reminders of a shared past that was fundamentally broken. "You know, don't you?" she finally said, her gaze fixed on a point somewhere beyond my shoulder. Her voice was flat, devoid of emotion. "I know enough," I replied, the words feeling rough in my throat. "I know about David Miller. I know about the wedding.
I know about the money. Her breath hitched, a small, choked sound. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. How was it supposed to happen, Sarah? My voice was still steady, but a rough edge had crept in. Were you going to tell me eventually? After the honeymoon? After they'd settled into their new life, funded by our savings? Tears welled up in her eyes, but they didn't fall. They just sat there, shimmering, reflecting the harsh fluorescent light. He's been through so much, she began, her voice trembling. His father. He was diagnosed with cancer right after he proposed to Emily. It was devastating. And his mother. She was so overwhelmed. He was trying to hold it all together.
And then his wedding. His father's last wish was to see him married, but he was so weak he couldn't manage the details. And Emily, she was falling apart. David was completely lost. I listened, my jaw tight. This was it then, the explanation. It sounded plausible, tragic even. But it didn't erase the lies. It didn't erase the thousands of dollars. So you stepped in? I asked, my voice laced with a dangerous calm. You decided to be the hero, to orchestrate a wedding for another man's happiness with our money. She finally met my gaze, her eyes filled with a desperate plea. I loved him, not like you and I did, not like that, but I loved him. He was my best friend growing up, before you, before everything. And seeing him in so much pain, seeing him drowning, I just wanted to help, to make sure he had one perfect day, one day where he didn't have to worry about anything else. The confession hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. My best friend, before me. A past I'd never truly known, a history that had been carefully hidden. It explained the intensity of her involvement, but it didn't excuse the deceit. Your best friend? I repeated, the words hollow. And Emily? Did she know you were involved? Did she know about the money? Sarah's shoulders slumped. She thought I was helping David with the planning because I was his friend. She didn't know the extent of it. She just knew I was there for him. And David, he was so focused on his father, on Emily's grief, he just accepted the help. He didn't ask where it was coming from. It was a tangled web, a Gordian knot of misplaced loyalty, grief, and ultimately, profound betrayal. I looked at her, at the woman I had loved, the woman I had built a life with, and I saw a stranger. The anger was still there, a burning ember, but it was now mixed with a bone-deep weariness, a profound sadness. You didn't think to tell me, Sarah, I asked, my voice quiet, raw. You didn't think I had a right to know? That maybe, just maybe, I could have helped, or at least understood? Her lip trembled. I was afraid you'd judge me, afraid you'd be angry, afraid you'd leave me. She choked back a sob. And I was afraid of admitting to myself how far I'd gone, how much I'd let this history with David overshadow our life. And you think this is better? I gestured vaguely around the room, at the silent house, at the fractured pieces of our lives scattered around us. You think this is what I deserved? To find out about your secret crusade, your secret finances, through a credit card statement, to have my entire reality upended in the middle of the night because you couldn't be honest with me? The tears finally fell, hot and heavy, streaking down her face. No, she whispered. No, it's not. I'm so sorry. I don't know what else to say. I made a terrible mistake. A mistake. That was it. A mistake. It felt like an insult. This wasn't a spilled coffee.
This was a deliberate, sustained act of deception that had potentially ruined our financial future and shattered the very foundation of our marriage. I stood up, my legs feeling stiff and heavy. The sun was now fully above the horizon, casting bright, unforgiving light into the room. There was nothing left to say. The truth, in all its messy, painful glory, was out, and it was a truth that had irrevocably changed us and the landscape of our lives. I can't do this, Sarah, I said, the words a rough exhalation. I can't look at you right now and see anything but the lies. I can't pretend that this isn't happening." Her breath hitched. "What are you saying?" I turned and walked towards the door, my gaze fixed straight ahead. "I'm saying I need time. I need space. I need to figure out what any of this means." I paused at the threshold, not looking back. I don't know if there's anything left to salvage, but I know one thing for sure. We can't go back to pretending. The door clicked shut behind me, the sound final and absolute. I walked to my car, the morning sun warm on my face, but it offered no comfort. The world felt vast and terrifyingly empty. The weight of what had happened, of the truth I now carried, settled deep within me. It was a heavy burden, but in a strange, dark way, it was also a form of liberation. The illusion was gone, and in its place, a raw, brutal reality. I started the engine, the rumble a low, mournful sound. I had no destination in mind, just the desperate need to drive, to escape the silence, and to confront the immense, gaping void that had just opened up in my life. The road ahead was uncertain, shrouded in fog, but for the first time in a long time, it felt like my own.